Andrew Stone, the self-made billionaire, sat behind his massive mahogany desk in his sleek glass-walled office. His eyes were fixed on the financial reports in front of him, but his mind was somewhere else. For years he had built his empire from the ground up. His company, a multi-billion-dollar tech giant, was one of the most successful in the world. But all the wealth, power, and success in the world couldn't fill the emptiness he felt at home. It wasn't the sterile, luxurious walls of his penthouse that caused him unrest. It was the silence. The deafening silence of a life with no real connection. And it had only grown more unbearable since the accident that changed everything. 5 years ago, Andrew's daughter Mia had been born. She was his world. Beautiful, with his dark hair and her mother's hazel eyes, Mia was perfect in every way, except for one thing. She had been born with a severe disability, leaving her unable to walk. Her small, fragile legs were paralyzed, rendering her dependent on others for even the simplest tasks. And despite countless doctors, therapies, and treatments, there had been no progress. Andrew, desperate to do anything for his daughter, poured millions into finding a cure. Yet the results were always the same. Mia remained confined to a wheelchair, unable to take a single step. The doctors said it was psychological. They said Mia's mind was preventing her from walking, not her body. Andrew had heard it all, every theory, every diagnosis, yet nothing worked. He'd watched his daughter grow older, still trapped in the same helpless state, and it had broken him. No amount of wealth or influence could fix what was wrong with her. His marriage to his wife, Sarah, had crumbled under the strain of it all. They'd become strangers, both of them so consumed by the stress and the overwhelming need to fix Mia that they lost sight of each other. Sarah left 2 years ago, taking Mia with her when she moved to a quieter part of the country. Andrew had stayed behind in his penthouse, buried in work, hoping that if he could just throw enough money at the problem, he could make it go away. But Mia's condition only deepened his sense of failure, leaving him isolated in a world of luxury that felt colder and colder with each passing day. Then came Amara. She wasn't what he expected. Amara was a young woman, no more than 25, hired as a temporary maid to help care for Mia. She had no medical background, no special credentials, but there was something different about her. Something about the way she moved, the way she interacted with Mia that caught Andrew's attention. He had hired her out of desperation, not knowing what else to do. Little did he know, Amara would change everything. Amara was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was quiet, unassuming, but her presence was calming, almost magnetic. And while Andrew was used to people being drawn to his wealth, Amara wasn't interested in that. She wasn't impressed by his money, his power, or his status. She simply saw Mia for who she was, a little girl who needed love, patience, and someone to truly be there for her. But Andrew didn't know it yet. He was too wrapped up in his own pain and guilt to see the impact Amara would have on his daughter and on his life. Andrew's mind was spinning, unable to make sense of what had just happened. Mia, his Mia, the one who had never been able to stand, was now balancing on Amara's feet, laughing and smiling like any other child her age. His thoughts were a tangled mess of disbelief, confusion, and something else. Hope. A hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. But as Mia continued to giggle, a knot tightened in Andrew's chest. Was this real? Or was it just a fluke? He'd seen therapists and specialists who swore they could help her, only for the results to fall short. Could it really be this simple? Could it be that Mia didn't need more therapy, more treatments, more money thrown at the problem? Could it be that she just needed this? He glanced at Amara, who was now helping Mia back onto the floor. The young maid's hands were steady, her movements gentle and sure, but there was no sign of surprise in her eyes. She wasn't acting like this was some grand miracle. She seemed completely calm, almost as though this was exactly what she had expected. Andrew's gaze shifted from Amara to Mia, who was now sitting on the floor, her legs splayed out in front of her, and then to the empty space beside them on the couch where Sarah, his ex-wife, had once sat. The air in the room felt heavy, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew didn't know what to say. For the first time, he felt utterly powerless. The woman standing in front of him, this young woman with no medical training, had done something no doctor had been able to do. She had helped his daughter stand. And that feeling, that surge of emotion, felt both overwhelming and terrifying. "What are you doing to her?" Andrew finally asked, the question coming out sharper than he had intended. Amara didn't flinch. She simply looked at him with those calm, untroubled eyes as though she understood what he was really asking. "I'm not doing anything to her, Mr. Stone," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'm letting her be." The words stung. They cut deep. Andrew could feel his chest tighten, a pang of guilt creeping up his spine. Was that all Mia had needed? Was all the therapy, all the treatments, all the money he had spent just an attempt to force his daughter into a mold she couldn't fit? And here was Amara, this stranger who wasn't trying to fix anything, just being present. And somehow, that was enough. "I don't understand," Andrew muttered, sitting down on the nearest chair, his hands running through his hair in frustration. "I don't understand how you did this." Amara took a breath and sat down across from him. Her gaze was steady, but there was a softness in her expression that Andrew hadn't expected. "You didn't break her, Mr. Stone," she said gently. "You just tried to fix her. That's not the same thing." Andrew stared at her, his mind racing. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to help her. I wanted to give her everything she needed, but nothing has worked." His voice cracked at the end, and he looked away, ashamed of how helpless he sounded. Amara gave a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to fix what's broken, we forget that nothing is broken. She just needed time. She needed to be seen." Andrew swallowed hard. He didn't know how to respond to that. There was so much anger inside him, so much frustration with himself and with everything he had done. But it wasn't just frustration. It was fear. Fear of the truth he had been ignoring for so long, that he had been trying to save Mia with everything except the one thing she needed most, his presence. "She's not a project, Mr. Stone," Amara continued, her voice soft but firm. "She's a little girl. She's been waiting for you to stop rushing and start listening." And as those words sank in, a part of Andrew he didn't know existed started to crack open. The walls he had built around himself, around his guilt, around his grief, started to crumble. He had been so focused on saving Mia with all the wrong things, money, treatment, solutions, that he had forgotten to be the father she needed. The father who could just sit with her, hold her, and be there when she needed him. His heart ached as he watched Mia, who had started to stack blocks on the floor, her small hands trembling but determined. She was trying again, just as Amara had said she would. There was no pressure, no rush. Just the quiet confidence of a child learning in her own time, on her own terms. Andrew knew that something had changed in him, something fundamental. He wasn't sure what it was, but he could feel it deep inside him, something stirring, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years. He wasn't ready to face it yet, but he knew this. For the first time in a long time, he was ready to stop rushing, and that scared him more than anything. Andrew had just come home from a long day at the office, his body exhausted, his mind still reeling with numbers and deals that never seemed to stop. The rain was coming down hard, pounding against the windows of his penthouse, as if the world outside shared his sense of heaviness. He was drenched, his suit clinging to his body as he stepped inside, trying to shake off the chill. The moment he closed the door behind him, though, something was different. It wasn't the usual cold silence that greeted him after a long day. No, this was something else. There was a sound he hadn't heard in years. Laughter, high-pitched and carefree, the kind of laughter that could only come from a child enjoying something as simple as a moment of joy. Andrew froze in the hallway, his briefcase still clutched in one hand, his shoes dripping onto the expensive rug beneath him. He stood there for a moment, trying to process what he was hearing. It was Mia's laugh, but it wasn't the soft, hesitant giggles he had come to expect from her over the years. This was different. It was genuine. It was full of life. And for the first time in a long while, Andrew didn't feel the crushing weight of sadness that had plagued him since her birth. Curiosity tugged at him, and without thinking, he found himself moving toward the living room. The laughter grew louder as he neared, a joyous sound that seemed to pierce through the gloom in his mind. As he entered the room, what he saw nearly made his heart stop. There in the center of the room was Mia, his precious Mia, standing. Her small legs were no longer limp and immobile, as they had always been. She was balancing herself, her tiny body trembling with effort, but standing nonetheless. She was giggling, her face lit up with a radiant smile as she looked down at the floor beneath her. But it wasn't just Mia standing. She was standing on someone's feet. And that someone was Amara. Andrew's breath caught in his throat as his eyes locked on the scene. There, kneeling on the floor, was Amara, the young maid he had hired just a few weeks ago. She was laying on her back, her legs raised in the air with Mia standing on top of them, her arms stretched out to hold the little girl steady. Amara's face was a picture of calm, her eyes soft with patience. But her smile, there was something in it. It wasn't just a smile of reassurance. It was one of quiet triumph. Mia was standing, really standing. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't the result of a new medical breakthrough. It was as if in this moment she was simply allowed to be a child, allowed to play, allowed to laugh, allowed to experience something she had been denied for so long. Amara looked up from Mia, meeting Andrew's gaze. Her smile didn't falter, but there was a quiet understanding in her eyes, as if she knew exactly what this moment meant. Andrew felt the ground shift beneath him. His heart raced, his chest tightened. He had watched doctors, therapists, and specialists try everything, but nothing had worked. And now in front of him, in his own living room, Mia was doing the impossible. She was standing. She was laughing. She was walking. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It wasn't supposed to be some maid with no medical training who caused this miracle. Andrew stepped forward, still in shock, his mind racing for answers. But the only words that escaped his lips were a breathless, "What? What is this?" Amara's gaze never wavered as she softly replied, "She's walking, Mr. Stone." And just like that, in that moment of disbelief, everything changed. The days that followed were unlike any Andrew had experienced before. For the first time in years, the penthouse felt alive. The silence that had once smothered every room was replaced by the sound of laughter, small but powerful. Mia had started to stand more frequently, taking tentative steps with Amara's steady guidance. There were no expectations, no pressure, just the simple joy of watching a child discover her world. Andrew had tried to hold on to the old familiar routine, the one he had built around work and success. But something in him had shifted, and no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the pull of his daughter's progress, of her growth, was too strong to resist. Every time he walked through the door, he found himself looking for Mia, waiting to see what new milestone she would reach, what small victory she would claim. But there was more to it than just Mia. There was a gnawing emptiness in Andrew that had nothing to do with his daughter's condition. He couldn't shake the feeling that something in his life had been broken long before Mia's disability had ever entered the picture. The truth hit him like a freight train one evening as he sat on the couch beside Amara, watching Mia play on the floor. The years of distance between him and Sarah, his ex-wife, were still raw. He had buried it all under the guise of working harder, of providing more. But the truth was clear now. It wasn't just Mia he had failed. It was Sarah, too. It was himself. He had pushed everyone away, thinking that wealth could fix everything, that success could buy happiness, but it hadn't. He had been blind to the fact that the one thing that really mattered, connection, love, being present, was something that couldn't be bought. As he watched Mia struggle to reach for a toy on the other side of the rug, her small body wobbling with each movement, Andrew felt his chest tighten. There was a familiar tension rising in him, a battle between his old instincts, push harder, do more, fix it, and the new uncomfortable reality that was beginning to take shape in his heart. "Amara," Andrew said softly, his voice almost unrecognizable in the quiet of the room. She turned toward him, her eyes soft but not surprised. "Yes, Mr. Stone?" "I've been rushing everything," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Mia's healing, her childhood, even my own grief. I've been trying to fix it all with money, with success, with things. But I missed the point. I missed her. And now I don't know how to undo all the years I've lost." Amara didn't respond right away. Instead, she shifted slightly, her gaze never leaving him. She wasn't judging him. She was waiting for him to face the truth, to see what he had been blind to all along. "I don't know if I can make up for all the time I've missed," Andrew continued, his words coming faster now, as though they couldn't stop once they'd started. "But I need to try. I need to be here, for her, for me. I don't want to keep pretending that I can fix everything with just my money and influence. I need to be the father she deserves." There was a long pause, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. Amara's eyes softened and a small, quiet smile tugged at her lips. "It's never too late to start," she said gently, her voice the calm in the storm of his emotions. "You're already here. You've already started." Andrew swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He had always believed that the answer to everything was to keep moving forward, to never stop until everything was fixed. But in this moment he realized that sometimes the hardest thing to do wasn't to keep moving. It was to stop, to slow down and simply be present, to show up for the people who needed him, even when it felt impossible. And as he looked at Mia sitting on the floor, struggling to grab the toy she wanted, something in him broke open. His daughter wasn't broken. She never had been. And now neither was he. He just needed to stop rushing. Amara's voice was soft but firm as she spoke again, breaking the silence. "She doesn't need to be fixed, Andrew. She just needs you to stay, to be here for both of you." Tears welled up in Andrew's eyes, and for the first time in years he didn't try to stop them. He let them fall. He let himself feel. And in that moment he knew he wasn't just witnessing Mia's healing. He was beginning his own. It was late one evening, and the penthouse was bathed in a soft golden light. Mia was in her room, playing with her toys, giggling in a way that Andrew had never heard before. The sound of her joy was like music to his ears, but something in his chest still felt tight. He had been spending more time with her, as he had promised, but there was a restlessness inside him that he couldn't shake. Amara had been right. Mia didn't need fixing. But what did that mean for him? What did it mean for his life, for his identity, for the man he had been trying to outrun all these years? He wasn't sure, but the more time he spent with her, the more he realized just how far he had distanced himself from the person he used to be. The father, the husband, the man who had once been full of dreams and hope. Now all he felt was guilt. It had been a week since their conversation, a week since he had told Amara that he was going to change. And yet the weight of his past still pressed down on him. The guilt was suffocating. He could feel it every time he looked at Mia, every time he saw her stand, her small legs trembling with each step she took. She was learning, she was growing, and he was finally there to witness it, but at the same time, he was terrified. What if he wasn't enough? What if his presence wasn't enough to heal the wounds of their broken family? What if the years of neglect could never be undone? He had made promises before, but they felt empty. Could he really change? Could he really be the father she needed when he had failed her for so long? That night, after dinner, Andrew found himself in his study, staring at the family photo on his desk, the one with him, Sarah, and Mia, taken before the accident. They all looked so happy, so whole. Andrew's fingers brushed over the glass frame as a wave of emotion hit him. He had loved Sarah. He had loved her with all his heart. And yet he had let their marriage fall apart, thinking that success could make up for the void between them. But it hadn't. It had only made things worse. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, and he looked up to see Amara standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Stone," she said softly, her voice gentle, "Mia's been asking for you." Andrew didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the photo, the weight of his own mistakes pressing down on him. He wanted to be better. He wanted to fix everything. But the truth was he wasn't sure he could. "I know you've been trying," Amara said, her voice cutting through his thoughts, "but you can't rush this. Healing doesn't work like that." Andrew's gaze met hers, his eyes filled with so many unspoken emotions. He had tried so hard to fix everything with his wealth, with his ambition, but none of that had worked. None of it had brought him the peace he desperately needed. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said quietly, his voice cracking. "I want to be the father she needs, but I feel like I'm failing her, like I'm failing myself. I don't know how to make up for all the years I've lost." Amara stepped into the room, her presence calm and steady. "You don't have to make up for anything, Andrew. You just need to show up. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to fix everything. You just need to be there for her." Her words were like a lifeline thrown into the storm that was raging inside him. For the first time in a long time, Andrew felt like he was allowed to breathe. He didn't have to fix everything. He didn't have to be perfect. He just had to be there. But even as the realization started to sink in, Andrew couldn't shake the nagging fear that if he didn't do something drastic, something big, he might lose her. He might lose the chance to be the father Mia deserved. The fear gripped him tight, and for a moment he felt himself spiraling back into the familiar darkness of doubt. Amara must have seen the shift in his eyes because she stepped closer, her gaze steady and unwavering. "You're not losing her, Andrew. You're here. That's what matters. You've already started." Andrew stood up, his mind whirling with all the thoughts he had been avoiding for so long. He didn't know if he was ready to fully accept the man he was becoming, the father he had neglected to be. But he knew one thing for sure. Mia needed him. And for the first time, he was ready to fight for her, ready to fight for the man he wanted to be. He turned to Amara, his expression resolute. "You're right. I don't need to fix it, but I do need to be here. I'm not running anymore. I'm staying." Amara's smile was soft but full of understanding. "Good. You'll see. You're already doing more than you think." And in that moment, Andrew knew that he wasn't just fighting for Mia anymore. He was fighting for himself, too. The road ahead would be long, and the past would always be there to remind him of his failures, but he was ready to face it. Not as the man he had been, but as the man he was becoming. The morning light streamed in through the windows of the penthouse, casting long shadows across the living room. Mia was already awake, her small form sitting on the rug, stacking blocks with a determination Andrew had never seen before. She was focused, her tiny hands working tirelessly to build something, anything. There was no rushing, no expectations, just pure unfiltered joy in the simple act of playing. Andrew watched her from the doorway, his heart swelling with pride and a deep sense of gratitude. He had spent so much of his life chasing after success, pushing for more, thinking that the more he achieved, the more he could give to Mia. But now, standing in the doorway, watching her try again and again, he understood. The key to his daughter's healing had never been in throwing money or solutions at the problem. It had always been about presence, about slowing down, about simply being there. He stepped into the room quietly, his eyes soft as he took in the scene. Mia glanced up at him, her eyes bright, and smiled, showing the kind of innocence and trust that only a child could give. Without a word, she reached for him, her little hand extended. She wanted him to join her, to be part of her world, even in the smallest of moments. Andrew's chest tightened. He had missed so much. So many moments that could have mattered if only he had been present. He had been so consumed by work, by the pressure to be perfect, that he hadn't seen what truly mattered. But now here she was, offering him the most beautiful thing he could ever receive, a chance to be the father she had always wanted. Mia's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Daddy, play." Her words were simple, but they cut through the walls Andrew had built around his heart. He had spent so much time believing he was not enough, believing that he needed to fix things, that he needed to make up for the lost time with grand gestures. But what Mia needed now was nothing grand. It was simple. It was him. It was his time, his love, his presence. He knelt beside her, his knees creaking as he lowered himself to her level. He took the blocks from her hands, his fingers gently brushing hers as he began to stack them with her. There was no rush. There was no pressure. There was only the moment. Mia laughed, a pure sound, the kind of laughter that only a child can make when they're fully immersed in the joy of the present. She knocked the blocks over, giggling when they tumbled to the floor. And in that moment, Andrew realized that everything he had been searching for, everything he thought he needed to fix, had been right here all along. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the achievements. It was about love. It was about showing up. Amara appeared in the doorway, watching them silently, her expression unreadable. But Andrew could see it now. He could see the quiet satisfaction in her eyes, the understanding that came from her own journey with loss, with grief. She wasn't just a maid. She had been a guide, a teacher. She had shown him the way, not by telling him, but by simply being there for Mia, by letting her be, by letting him be. "Thank you," Andrew said, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't know how else to say it. He didn't know how to express the overwhelming gratitude he felt for this woman who had changed everything. Amara smiled softly, but there was no pride in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me," she said quietly. "I didn't heal her. You did by being here." Andrew looked back at Mia, who was now trying to stack the blocks again, a look of concentration on her face. He could see the determination in her eyes, the same determination that he had once seen in himself, long before the weight of the world had dulled his spirit. He was no longer the man who rushed through life, consumed by the need to fix things. He was no longer the man who thought money could solve all problems. He had found something much more precious. He had found peace. He had found his daughter. He had found himself. "I'm sorry," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I've wasted so much time." Amara nodded, her gaze soft. "It's never too late, Andrew. You're here now, and that's what matters." Andrew watched Mia, her tiny hands reaching for another block, her small voice calling to him again. "Daddy, play." And he did. He played. Not as a billionaire, not as the man who could fix everything, but as a father. A father who had finally stopped rushing. A father who had finally shown up. And for the first time in years, Andrew Stone smiled. Not because of his wealth, not because of his achievements, but because of the little girl who had shown him the true meaning of healing, of love, of family. The following weeks felt like a dream to Andrew. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect or that the weight of his past mistakes had vanished overnight. But there was a new lightness in his home, a peace that had been absent for so long. The penthouse, which had once felt like a cold, sterile place, now felt alive. It was filled with the sound of laughter, the warmth of quiet moments, and the soft, steady rhythm of life moving forward. Mia's progress continued. She stood on her own for longer stretches of time, took a few more steps each day, and every time she did, Andrew's heart swelled with pride. But it wasn't just her physical progress that amazed him. It was the way she was blossoming emotionally, too. She was laughing more, talking more, and even playing with a confidence that had once seemed impossible. The girl who had once been so fragile, so hesitant, was now full of life and light. Andrew was right there with her every step of the way. He no longer rushed through the days, no longer buried himself in work to avoid facing his own fears. He spent more time with Mia, playing with her, listening to her, and letting her take the lead. The bond between them grew stronger each day, and for the first time, Andrew felt like a real father. Not a provider, not a fixer, but a father. And then, one quiet evening, as Andrew sat on the couch, watching Mia play with her blocks on the floor, a moment of clarity hit him. He had been so caught up in fixing things, in believing that success was the answer to every problem. But the real answer, he realized now, had always been right in front of him. It was love. It was presence. It was connection. He looked up at Amara, who was sitting at the kitchen counter, quietly reading. She had become more than just the maid in his home. She had become a part of their family, a steady, quiet force that had brought them all together. "Amara," Andrew said, his voice softer than it had ever been, "I don't know how to thank you. You've changed everything for us, for me." Amara looked up from her book, her expression calm and understanding. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence spoke louder than words ever could. She simply smiled. A smile that spoke of acceptance, of understanding, and of quiet strength. "You've changed, too," she said quietly. "You're here now. That's what matters." Andrew nodded. feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. He had spent so much of his life trying to fix things, trying to be someone he wasn't. But now he was starting to understand what it meant to truly show up, to be present, to be the father his daughter needed. And in doing so, he had found a peace within himself that he had never thought possible. As he watched Mia stack her blocks, her small hands working tirelessly, he felt a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. For the first time, he wasn't just proud of her progress, he was proud of himself, proud of the man he was becoming. "I'm sorry," he whispered to himself, his heart full. "I'm so sorry for the time I wasted." But in that moment, Andrew realized that there was no need to apologize anymore. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't undo the years of distance, of mistakes. But what he could do was move forward. He could be the father Mia needed. He could be the man who stopped rushing and started living. And as the evening stretched on, with Mia's laughter filling the room and the soft glow of the setting sun filtering through the windows, Andrew knew that everything was different now. Not because of some miracle, but because of the small everyday moments. The moments where he was present. The moments where he chose to stay. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't the man he used to be. But that was okay, because for the first time in his life he understood what really mattered. And in that understanding he had found the true meaning of family.